Peace. This is the Ask Your Old Head podcast with Justice Rajee. Home, the place where one lives permanently, especially as a member of a family or a household. An institution for people needing professional care or supervision. In sports, the goal or the end point. Also, a place where something flourishes or is most typically found or from which it originates. All of these are part of the basic definition of home. To me, home is a lot of things, and it's very important in the development and the origination of who one is, as I see it. I think for me, it's especially important in my exploration and the ideas I had behind this work and why I started working on this podcast. There's a concept in the piece around home. Home, the place from which one hails, where you sleep, where the heart is, where the hatred is, where you pay rent or a mortgage, where they always welcome you, where they will miss you when you're gone, where you find yourself, where you find your community, where you make a space of your own. Home to me is as much about the physical experience and the place where you live and the elements, the physical conditions. Is it cold? Is it hot? Is it dense, urban space? Is it a rural space? Is it a wide open rural space? Right? Is it a suburban space? Is it somewhere between that suburban urban space that we haven't quite got a name for just yet? All these things to me come into the context of home, and it is really important, I think, and the direction I'll be taking this podcast over the next year, to think about home and the places that I've called home that have impacted my own development and has led me to the place where I started doing this work, and has continued to inform the work that I do. I have 3 physical places that I call home. Okay, so that's 3 places that I've lived and developed. Some part of my life is going on there, some significance. As with all of us, the first place you call home, you have no choice over. You just come into the world as you come into the world. You don't get to decide that place. And for most of us, it's highly unlikely that you go far from that place in terms of where you call home or where you live. Which makes some of the current realities and economic realities that we live in especially painful when the only place that you've known becomes the last place, or not the place that you can reside any longer or to call home any longer. But that's a story for another podcast. For this podcast, I'm laying out that for the next, year and a half or so, the running concept that I'll be touching base with as I work through the pieces that I develop will be the ideas of home and the impact that the places I've called home have had on who I am, how I see the world, and the things I'm motivated to do, and the things that initiated me wanting to start this podcast. I've just hit 25 episodes officially. Got some more in the can. I have some more lost tapes that I don't count or don't intend to release. But as something that I've been working on in one form or another for several years, going on almost 3 years. Not a ton of production, I guess, in some senses. But that's not necessarily my goal. My goal when I started thinking about this and started trying to iterate on what I'm doing was not to have something to say every day in the context of, say, like a video log, or even every week that one may do in some styles of audio podcast where doing the remains of the day or the events of the day and the blow by blow of certain things that wasn't my goal with the work that I'm doing here. And I dig that other people have different goals. But mine, as I said, this project is a creative project exploring modern masculinity at the intersection of race, gender, class, culture, um, what it means to be a black man as I see it, the challenges I'm wrestling with, from self-development for my own self to those that I serve, to those that I exist and operate with as members of the community. What does it mean as a father? And on a very real level, how do we engage those who are harmed by the way masculinity has been played out in our society, and pulling down to the part of that world that I exist in my own community. So that's where, this work originated for me, and the motivation to do it, and trying to build a lane to explore these things in a way that I felt was meaningful. So home, like I said, where you sleep, where the heart is, where the hatred is, where you pay rent or mortgage, where they always welcome you, where they miss you when you're gone, where you find yourself, where you find your community, where you make a space of your own. I've lived in 3 places physically, and by lived meaning I've slept, lived there, had an apartment, extended life. I was born in New Jersey, Trenton to be exact, but I grew up in Willingboro, between the 2 places. Willingboro being the lion's share at that time, but Trenton still also being home. So the Delaware Valley and the surrounding lands and everything New Jersey is a part of who I am. I went from there to Pittsburgh. It's where I went to college. It's where I formed my own communities, where I got the knowledge of myself. It's where I made connections and took the first steps, as I see it, of placing myself at the center of my life and responsibility. Right, a very important part of the life of any person is, to me, that transition from a child to an adolescent to an adult, into whatever that means for your community or your culture, where you are now the center, or the person that is responsible, or the holder of the flame, so to speak, for what you're doing and what you live by. So that was my place to do that, Pittsburgh. And where I reside now, where I call home, where I'm raising my family, where I'm doing the work that I do in my service here in Portland, Oregon. All 3 of these places physically are places where I made a home, where I've made a way. Obviously, New Jersey being the one that I didn't get to choose, I just came there. I just, appeared, so to speak. Pittsburgh being the one that I chose, and I did have to choose it, and I may have elaborated on an episode in the past. I'm not sure, but at some point you'll hear more about the story of me in that city, power born to those so aligned, and what that means to me and what I mean to it, and what parts of that will never be separated from me. In Portland, where I live now, where I've been for over a decade, and despite the challenges that our modern age may bring, and questions even it raises for me about this city and about this state, it is my home, and I'm invested here. And there's one other lane there, and that's the cultural roots. The places where my identity development and those things are rooted and rested. Where they hail from, and that is a deeper concept that we'll be exploring as I work through this process. I think it's really important for one to have some ability to be critical about the places that formed them, the people. What were the resources? What was the circumstance of the city or the space where you were at? What were the social pressures? What were the societal realities? What was happening with those who were responsible for you that, led to the choices that they've made. What moved them, in one direction or another? How deeply do you understand, you know, their motivations at that time? Are those their motivations? Have you ever asked? Have you ever inquired? For the African American community, for Black people, in most cases, there's a lot to be learned by exploring the places that your family is called home. Now, I've done some work on my family tree, so I know, at least in terms of what I've been able to research, New Jersey, for both sides of my family, has been home since the early 1900s. However, counter to sometimes the narrative that I've experienced, for a significant, quarter of my family, the jump was not directly from, say, North Carolina, South Carolina to New Jersey, but a quarter of it was. But Maryland, the Pennsylvania, York, Peach Bottom, basically generally the Maryland-Pennsylvania border shows up significantly in the history I've been able to research. North Carolina is there. South Carolina is there as a big part. The Virgin Islands are there. With roots moving other places that, as I get the time to study them, where I feel comfortable speaking on it, and I can make some secure connections, I'd be happy. I look forward to adding on about that. But that's all a part of the story, and trying to understand the forces that have impacted the way I've been given what I've been given, and the direction I've been given, and why the people who have been responsible for me made the choices that they made. And then also, how does that impact what I think one should do in the formation of their own home? How does that impact when someone like me who did not have the feeling of a singular neighborhood or space that was always in your mind, yours, in your communities, that when that was stripped away, you feel that, that trauma. You feel that psychic trauma of that experience. While also, though, being able to be empathetic to those who have experienced that and be present for them. When you've also, though, on the other hand, as someone that you've always felt the ability or the essential need to move. If it ain't working out, make a move, right? But how do you then establish, some of those bonds and the community that you need, and not just be a transient of sort? How do you develop a nomadic culture where even though you're on the move, your value system is traveling with you? And then making the longer jump, because I've done some ancestry stuff and genetic stuff. It's a good chance at least one thread of my birth line is from a culture that practiced the nomadic lifestyle, prior to being enslaved. Right? So what does that mean? Is that something that shows up for me in terms of being comfortable with movement? Is it older? Is it just a reflection of a current circumstance that I grew up in? Or is it something maybe that's deeper? Is my kind of enjoyment and love for the transition from a highlands to a plain maybe rooted in some ancestral memory or whatever that's, showing up in my genes? I don't know. These are questions. These are the things that I want to explore and to think about, and encourage you to think about as you tap in and listen to the podcast and some of the work that some of the stuff I'm going to be putting together, exploring these experiences and asking the questions that I think need to be asked. Making a turn when you think about home, another big thing, especially in the transition of becoming, moving out of your family and moving into the man you are on your own, who you are yourself, your own experiences that craft your life. There are people who were instrumental in me ending up and being in Pittsburgh, going to college there, meeting the people I met, that they could not have foreseen the outcome that would be generated by my experience there. but they're instrumental in me being there, right? And their whatever positive intent they had, I took and did other things with it. This is significant. Thinking about what is the ethics and the aesthetic of a city, a place that you call home. And what stuff do you bring with you from where you started, and what stuff do you have to adapt or pick up in the place that you go? And then, the deeper place as we move to a future where I think we will do a lot more of the proactive choosing of the places that we call home in this land and in others. If we are putting ourselves in the spot to occupy a future that is defined by the value system and the ideas that our highest ideas and our greatest ideas and our greatest wants and needs, and the wishes to have a fair and equitable society and culture, what are those aspects that we need to be in agreement and to discuss and debate and try to put into play in the world that we would shape, in the planet that we would grow, the home that we would make. So that's the things that are coming down the line. And this episode is, in a sense, an announcement or just a defining to give the direction of what I'll be working on. I think we all have to get very comfortable with what's home. The good, the bad, the painful, the lies, the truths. And that's the things I'm going to be working on in this episode. I'm also acknowledging that to support that work, and the vision that I have, I will be doing some more documentary style episodes. I'm trying my hand at that. Some video and documentary type stuff, some other things. If you are one that checks the blog, sometimes, I post pictures and I take photographs of everybody that I interview. So there'll be more of that as a part of this. And also, I intend to run my first sort of Indiegogo campaign. I've been trying to figure out, while doing this all out of my own pocket and trying to build some things around it and figure out exactly what I'm doing, to establish the goals, develop, what it is, what is the podcast, what is the work that surrounds it, establish its value, and start to try to build an audience. To figure out where, money and the resources to keep it going and to generate something of meaning where they would meet. If you listen to the Majestic Returns episode, which was the last episode I put out, I embrace alternative capital models. I'm not necessarily against sponsorship of some kind, but I haven't really figured that piece out yet. However, I feel like there's no harm or loss in one exploring and figuring out, one, if people are listening, and then if they're listening, if it's valuable enough to them to put something on it. My goal is to get through a lot more episodes in the next, 12 months, but 18 months for sure. And part of that will be made possible by developing the resources that are needed to keep this going. Podcasts don't run on good vibrations. There's money outlays and equipment and travel costs because I like to interview people in person. If I didn't say it, a part of this project, direction is traveling physically to these places. Now, so I'll be going to Pittsburgh in about 2 weeks, and I'm hoping to have a couple people lined up and other things. I'll have some content that's going to be generated, some episodes that you'll hear over the following months. I'll be going back home to where it all started. I'm going to start in the middle of my arc, which is Pittsburgh. Go back to the beginning, which is New Jersey, and then come back to Portland again. Although there will be ongoing episodes from Portland because I live here. So obviously, a lot of people you're going to hear live close. But bringing in, trying to find where all these mesh points come together, where these things show value to each other, where they connect, why they are significant for me, with the hope that maybe you will be encouraged or inspired to dig in for your own edification. What's your arc? What are your landing points? Is it one city? That doesn't mean it doesn't have, definition and detail. And there could be different neighborhoods that you lived in. I can remember, the different parts of Trenton that we lived in and or family lived in. Even though Willenboro only lived in one place, there's significance in the different where we hung out, where we, did things as kids, the way I interact with where I'm from as an adult, the way when something looks differently, from the vision and the perspective of a child to the perspective of a teenager, to the perspective of a young man, to a perspective of the somewhere between young man and, middle-aged man, to the modern, the current man that you are, that I am. I guess I should say you may align some other way. So pardon if I interpreted that unfairly. I have modest goals. So, every bit that is contributed or not contributed, if I don't hit the mark, is meaningful. And it's helping me towards developing this out and figuring out what this is in the long term, and where, as a community in a world where we have so much media and content, some that doesn't really move us anywhere, what is it that we need to be hearing, and what is where can we get access those conversations to develop and further sort of a different vision for ourselves and for our community. So with that, just so you know, this is I guess I should say, an official announcement that there will be an Indiegogo campaign kicking off August 1st-ish, maybe August 2nd, depending on a couple factors and pieces. I'll be looking to raise, I believe I have it on there. It's going to be $700 to offset the cost of recording, hosting the site, hosting the show, and also just a test. And I might actually even go lower, because really the vision here is I'm looking to find out, for those that listen, is what I'm doing valuable enough to you that you feel you would want to contribute to the work, and that be the way one would say pay the subscription cost, so to speak, or whatever have you. Either way, I'm going to be putting money into this and putting my time into this and keep it going the best I can. But I want to find out what's out there. Now, also with this, I'll be doing some other exploring and some other learning, because there's a lot I need to do. One, I need to learn more about those who do actually listening to the podcast. So there will be a survey available, probably will be attached to this episode, where one can give me back some data if you choose to, because it really would help if I had an idea who's listening and what you like and what's important to you, what do you find valuable about what I'm doing, if you like it. Then the next phase from there is, what else can I use my creative space and my creative energy to add on to your world and add on to your life. As always, this show is primarily about people telling real stories and sharing their lives, and it just in a safe window. One does not need to be the CEO of a company or jumped out of a burning building while saving a baby to be qualified to be a guest on my show. Right now, my focus is trying to extract certain stories from Black men, and I'm looking to expand that. But I do not want to cross certain lines as it pertains to that, especially which is bringing other, from a gender perspective, there's some women I really want to talk to and have conversations with, but I will not invite women on this show to not tell their own story for their own value. So while I work out some pieces and parts of how that will show up, and then also those identifying other wise within the spectrum as it is, I want people to come on there and speak their truth, and for those that listen to find some value in it. So we'll move through one arc and creative window, and others will open. So take this as a kickoff, as an announcement, whatever, that, the podcast will be continuing to go strong. There'll be some different things available. Some right here in the feed. Some will be on the blog. Some will probably pop up in the Facebook page. I'm trying to do a little more with that. Some will be showing up, who knows where, maybe on the Instagram. If you follow me on Instagram or Twitter at JUST underscore IFE. That's JUST underscore IFE. You can see pictures and things I got going on. And when I do take time to sit on the Twitter machine, which I'm working on doing more, you can locate me there. You can also search for the Ask Your Old Head podcast fan page or the community page. I'm not sure which is the right way to call it, on Facebook. And always the blog, www.askyouroldhead.com, will be cooking. Be posting up. Need to update some things there. But this is my work, and the work will continue, and the work will keep going. Hopefully, you will see some value and want to kick in, put something on it. But more importantly, man, share this. Share the podcast. Share the interviews. If you listen to an episode and you really like what you heard or you found something valuable in it, share it with a friend. Pass it on. That's how I think this thing grows. I think that's the most important thing that you could do if you really like the work. And I'm going to keep working on the other stuff either way. But home. So if you got some thoughts about home, or even some questions about home for your own self that you'd like to explore, or have questions, or you'd think would be good for me to dig into, please feel free to either post it on the Facebook page. You can send it to me on Twitter. Just hit me with a @ or an hashtag AYO home. That's hashtag AYO home. Whatever your question is, I'll do search and try to find it. Add it to my battery of inquiry, so that may show up either in interviews, it may show up in some of the other story pieces that are coming your way. Looking to make this a little more interactive and put the time in. So with that, I'm going to say I think it's time for me to exit and maybe get to the gym or something. In any event, I appreciate you. Thank you for listening to the show. Keep a lookout, and you can find us on all the places you find podcasts, from the iTunes to the Google to the Stitcher to just searching it on the old internet, YouTube, SoundCloud a little bit. We're there in all the formats. Thank you. In all things, don't settle for what will do when you can do what you will. Thank you for listening to the Ask Your Old Head podcast with Justice Rajee. Peace.